When we think of the elements that make up a video game, music is one that often gets swept under the rug. Now, sure, in most cases, a game's soundtrack will have little to no correlation to the core gameplay, but that doesn't mean it won't play a key role in its development. Imagine we have this developer, and the developer creates a story about someone going through an existential crisis while climbing up a big-ass mountain. Now, how exactly would this journey sound? And the answer is pretty damn hot, if you ask me. Now, again, picture that same scene, but this time without any music playing at all, and the result is pretty boring. That's because when a game lacks an enjoyable soundtrack, its attempts at immersion and world building just fall flat. So because of its importance, I wanted to explore what is it that makes video game music sound good, as well as demonstrate the effects it has to both the game and the players themselves. Video game music can essentially be broken down into three very broad pieces of a pie. There's UI music, cutscene music, and adaptive music. UI or user interface music is what sets the tone for a game. This can be done through title cards, main menus, pause screens, loading screens, and even save points. When you boot up a game like Elden Ring, it immediately welcomes you with this grand orchestra letting you know, yeah, this shit is kinda epic. Or maybe you've been waiting in a GTA loading screen, hearing that same song loop over and over and over and over and over, and this music acts sort of like the hype man for a video game, with the goal being to energize the audience so that they feel excited for the actual game itself. And this goes with every aspect. Your game has a really bland and empty pause menu? Well, how about you add one of the hardest beats of the century to it? And seriously, this song has no business going so hard. The music in this category also gets associated with the feelings of nostalgia, since you pretty much hear these songs every time you play the game. But they can also serve a practical purpose as well, sometimes being used as a way to give the player insight as to what's going on in their game. And a good example of this is in-game save points. A save point is a resource that gives the player a sense of relief from all the hot local baddies in their area. Think of places like the Firelink Shrine in Dark Souls, or the save rooms in Resident Evil games. Each of these areas have their own little jingles to let the player know they don't have to worry about whatever's going on outside. And this effect can also be found with cutscene music. And quickly, there will be spoilers for the following games. When developing a story, cutscene music can often be the most impactful. Take the final scene from the first Last of Us game. It ends with this tense conversation between Joel and Ellie, where she questions if everything Joel said about the Fireflies was true. And if you played the game, you'd know 30 minutes ago, Joel was boosting up his KD ratio on a bunch of Fireflies. And they weren't pleasant deaths either. Joel went on an absolute killing spree, murdering a bunch of innocent people in some of the most brutal and screwed up ways possible. This reaction comes after he finds out the world can find a cure for the apocalypse, but at the cost of Ellie's life. So with that in mind, Joel decided to hide the truth from Ellie. And side note, that seemed to work out pretty well for him. But while this whole sequence is going on, there's this long dramatic pause that's being filled with a sweet-ass guitar riff creeping from out of the background, easing the tension of the conversation. The entire scene floods you with an influx of emotions as you put yourself in Joel's shoes and question what you might have done in this situation. And this feeling is only elevated due to the soundtrack. A similar effect occurs in Red Dead 2, where throughout the whole game, you pretty much know this guy, he ain't gonna make it. But when you finally see Arthur taking his last breaths to the calm whispery vocals of Crash of Worlds, it still hits pretty hard. The point of this music is to fill the player with the same exact emotions that's going on throughout the story. Someone in the game gets betrayed, then you should also feel betrayed. A main character starts raging, then you should also get angry. And that's because the complementing soundtracks are used as a tool to amplify these feelings. And that brings me to adaptive music, which much like cutscene music also provokes a feeling, but this is done in a much more behind the scenes way. Adaptive music is background music that changes in response to the player or in-game events. This could be fast traveling in an open world game, moving on to the next level, or even entering a boss fight. If you're roaming around the gruesome hellscape setting of Doom, would you rather be killing demons to the sound of heavy metal or KK Slider? Every part of a game's soundtrack is meticulously planned out so that it fits the tone of a specific environment. When I enter a boss fight, I'm expecting this intense, over-the-top battle, so I'd want the music to match that. A common challenge developers face when creating this music is making sure a song can continuously loop without without sounding annoying, and this is something indie developers do really well, which is totally crazy because some of these teams are 10 times smaller than AAA studios, but they still seem to put more of an emphasis on the soundtrack as a whole, with some going as far as to implement live orchestras into their games, and this concept is only becoming more common in the video game industry. That's not to discredit the larger studios either, because they've created some of the most iconic soundtracks to this day, but what separates them from indie developers is that they don't need a grand soundtrack for their games to be successful. When working with a smaller company, having a great soundtrack is almost a necessity, because it allows you to separate yourselves from the competition and put your own creative touch on a game. And I haven't even mentioned rhythm games yet, which adds an entirely new dimension to adaptive music. It's pretty much adaptive music, but strung out on steroids and Bang energy drinks. What I mean is, the music isn't just background ambience for the gameplay. In rhythm games, the music is the gameplay. Games like Bullets Per Minute and Crypt of the Necrodancer constrict the player's movement so that they can only maneuver to the beat of a song. And since music is the main focus for these games, they pretty much have to be bangers. Nobody would want to play a rhythm game if it sounded like a 3rd grade band recital. The overall production quality of video game music has come such a long way from its once humble beginnings, but that still doesn't mean every soundtrack that comes out is a 10 out of 10. There are still some awful, ear-wrenching soundtracks that really make you wonder why they're even in the game in the first place. Like, if I hear any song from Yoshi's New Island, it makes me want to go insane. I'd actually want to dropkick every Yoshi-looking lizard as far as I possibly can. So with that being said, video game music is such a special feature, one that I hope only improves as time goes on. It's not just important to a game's development, it's also important to me. Anyway, that's pretty much it, and I know I made a video on this topic before, but it wasn't very good, so hopefully I was able to do it justice. And I know this was pretty surface level in terms of content, so if you want to learn more about this topic, here's a few more videos that I think are really well made in the subject. Other than that, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.